That was the meeting where they were discharged and they were told, we're moving you to hospice care, palliative care. And that's where the concept of our foundation was born, because Robert immediately said, if we're being discharged, I want to go to the ocean. And my little crew of angels said, let's make it happen. So they started researching houses on the ocean, and they found a beautiful place with an ocean view, and they moved all of our stuff in from our home, all the things like Tyler's trains and Robert's favorite things, and made it feel like our home on the beach.
Yes, this is the Mark Haney Show, and we are on a mission to ignite the entrepreneurial revolution right here in the hometown we love. We do that by building the Backyard Advantage, which is becoming the most connected community in the world for local entrepreneurs, and it's based around this culture of love, right? Helping one another. And today on the show, we are going to help you by sharing a woman and her story in the organization that she has built, and that I think we're all going to be able to relate to at some level. And so buckle up for this, because I think you're going to want to listen carefully, and it's going to probably affect you in a personal way, is my guess. So with that said, I want to introduce you to Catrina Simbe-Geriak. Is that how you
Geriak.
Geriak. I'm sorry.
It's a very common mistake.
I should have asked prior to announcing that. You are somebody who I met through my daughter. You occupy an office here at the Growth Factory. And as I began to hear your story, I think, and Ashley, my daughter, was saying, this is somebody you need to talk to, Dad. And so I'm glad I did. And I don't know you very well. So with that said, maybe I'll just start by letting you introduce yourself, because you have more of a background than your organization, Tyler's Grace Foundation. You're more than that. So maybe just give us a little bit of your background.
Absolutely. And so thank you for having me here. And I apologize in advance that I get emotional in certain parts of my story, but like you said, I hope it really resonates with your community. There's so many lessons I've learned along the way, both professionally and also personally through my journey. But in a nutshell, I grew up born in San Francisco. I'm a Niners fan. Go Niners.
Yes.
Although we're very disappointed. It's okay. And then very modest means. Have been, my mother was a single mom. My father worked very, very hard, and we just kind of stayed connected through what it's like to be a divorced product of a divorced family. And it taught me early on what hard work looks like. And to get food on the table and to do all the things that you need to do requires just grit. And so I learned that from a very young age. I had my first job at 11. And I've always been really attracted to doing work with people.
And you turned down a job. You and I were talking earlier. You turned down a job for $7 a day, where you had to practice, I guess 6 days a week, and then you get $7 a day to show up at a Niner game and be a cheerleader.
Yes.
You had to say no, did not pay the bills.
That's right. I was in my early 20s, and going back to getting food on the table, that was the priority, and getting through school. So it was a great opportunity to try out.
Yeah. And now you've built this very unique life. But tell us about Tyler's Grace Foundation, and then maybe, if you don't mind, sharing a story about how it originated.
Yeah, definitely. So I was what I would call in the peak of my professional career. I was in my early 30s, and I had climbed the corporate ladder for many years, met the man of my dreams, did not want to be a mom, but he convinced me that it's a beautiful thing to be a parent. And so we had our first child, who's Tyler. And life pivoted so differently, because once you have a child, as you know, everything just gets in very different perspective. And so marching away, I'm doing the corporate thing. My husband is helping stay home with Tyler. Oh. And it's a beautiful thing. He was a social worker by trade, so he just fell right into fatherhood very, very nicely. Around 4 years old, my son started complaining of headaches. And so he would wake up every day and just say, "Mom, my head hurts." And it was rare, because he was a very healthy child up until that stage. And then he would feel nauseous, and then he'd just go about his day. And this went on for a couple of days, to the point where the discernment and the mommy intuition said, this can't be right. Mm-hmm. So I took him into the pediatrician, and she said, it's probably just a virus. I would just let it pass. 2 days later, he was still complaining of headaches, to the point where my discernment said, take him to the emergency room. And so we did. Within 20 minutes after being diagnosed and just kind of asked some stat type questions from the doctor, he asked to do a scan, and then they encountered about a grapefruit sized tumor in the back of my son's head.
Oh.
And before we knew it, we were being rushed off to Lucille Packard Children's Hospital for brain surgery the next day.
Oh my goodness.
During this time, I think this is a life lesson that was percolating within me, which is you just have to believe. And that's when I say personally, professionally translates to who I am, is that I believed that we would cure Tyler. I believed not just through praying and hope and miracles, but that there had to be a way, because you can't think of anything else. It's not possible. So we did have brain surgery, and initially, Mark, they told us that we were just so lucky because they were able to take it all out, and that he was never going to have any problems again after that. And to use the neurosurgeon's quote, he said, if I had a brain tumor, I'd want it to be like Tyler's, because he's going to live a wonderful, wonderful life. And so we went on for 3 months and basically felt like we were given a miracle. And showed up for our first MRI and found that it had come back even more aggressively. So we had another brain surgery. So that started our journey of 2.5 years of fighting for Tyler. About a year into the journey, my husband started feeling not well. Both of us hadn't been eating. You're sleeping on the hospital beds.
So at this stage, Tyler is he's had the one big surgery. And is that the only surgery he had at that stage?
2 surgeries.
He had 2 surgeries, and one was to take out a tumor that was the size of a grapefruit in a 4-year-old kid, mm-hmm. and then he has another surgery, mm-hmm. and that's to take out another tumor, big tumor.
Some fast-growing small tumors that was right next to where the first one had lived.
Okay.
And so, although they do an aggressive job of trying to clear the whole area, some of the cancerous cells moved to another part of the back of his brain. So we had 2 major surgeries, and then we rolled into everyday radiation and chemotherapy. Pretty aggressive treatment program.
So that's taken a toll on the family, on you and your husband, mm-hmm. and you probably burning the candle at both ends, mm-hmm. high stress. Mm-hmm. Just mm-hmm. a battle. And my daughter Samantha was 2 at the time. So, caring for Samantha, she was at every radiation appointment, every chemo appointment. It was definitely a family affair. Robert and I and Sam, we just basically locked arms and said, we're going to get Tyler through this with the support of our whole family and community. And certainly it takes a village, and we felt that support, but our nucleus was certainly there present every day for the fight. And during this time, Robert started to complain that he wasn't feeling as well, and he should probably go in and just see, how he could feel better while we're fighting this fight. And so we scheduled an appointment with his doctor, and she said, your blood work is telling me a sign that something isn't right. Can you go into an ear, nose, and throat doctor, because you're saying you're having difficulty eating? And the next day, he was scheduled for a procedure so they could go and make sure everything was fine. And when I came to pick him up, the doctor said, have you talked to your husband yet? And I said no. And I remember looking at Robert, Tyler's dad, and saying, is everything okay? And he just kind of looked at me with a blank stare. Very poor bedside manner, doctor said, just so you know, your husband has a tumor. It definitely looks cancerous, because it's not only in his stomach, but it's progressed to his esophagus, which is causing all of the eating issues and digestion issues. I can't thank enough our team at Lucille Packard and Stanford, because I called Tyler's doctor, Trish Murphy, who's an NP, and I said, you aren't going to believe this, but we have a diagnosis for Robert. And she said, come to the emergency room. We will find a way to get him here. So that they could be seen mm-hmm. in the same facility. And sure enough, they did. They found a way to get him seen and admitted, and the next 2 years became fighting for both of them. Mm-hmm. And the fight with Robert, that included surgery and chemo and radiation?
Actually, they wouldn't operate on Robert because it had spread so much. They felt it was inoperable. He was in his 40s, young man. athlete, not smoked a day in his life, not a drinker. And still, that was our diagnosis, that it was inoperable, and that we would get after it with aggressive chemo and radiation. And actually, from the day he was diagnosed, we were given the terminal diagnosis for Robert.
Oh, wow. Okay, so there was like almost very limited hope, at least by the medical profession at that stage.
Yes.
And at this stage, was Tyler terminal, or was he still, were the medical people still holding out hope for him?
Yeah.
So he's still, I guess, sort of, he's in the process of figuring out how to recover and live.
Yes.
And Robert's just kind of going to make it he's winding it down in his own mind, I guess in the family's mind too. Yeah.
I think we all believed, another word, belief, that both of them could miraculously survive. It's the only way to make it through every day, is to, believe that everything we're doing every day will lead itself to hopefully a miracle, and that they would heal or we'd get more time. I think with Robert, we just were hoping for more time. With the terminal diagnosis of 6 months, we just felt like that wasn't fair. So what can we do?
6 months. And how long did he make it?
About 6 months.
About 6 months. And okay, I'll let you continue the story. There's so many ways I could want to ask questions, but I'd rather have you just share it the way that you think it would help us to understand it more.
Yeah. I think the sad thing is most of us have been touched by cancer. So hopefully that piece of my story resonates. You can probably imagine the time you've heard of someone you love or you're close to that's either been diagnosed or you've lost. And I think in this case, because of that, we just had the whole community rally around us. They all empathized, loved us, did everything that they possibly could to support us during this time. I took time off work. My company was very generous. I worked for corporate America, and just they rallied around and said, take as much time as you need. And my sister came up and moved in full time with us. She helped me with Sammy. She became Tyler's best friend. So it really does take a community of people surrounding you with love. I do not think I would have made it if not for that. And the bottom line is God's grace. I mean, just getting out of bed every day has to be through that, because there's no other way to describe how I was able to stay as resilient and committed and full of energy and everything the boys needed throughout the whole journey.
How did Tyler deal with his dad being sick, and maybe even your daughter?
Yeah. It was hard because I also got coaching on how do you talk to your children? How do you talk to Tyler when he's also dealing with cancer? Yeah, I had this big thing with Tyler. He knew he was in and out of the hospital, but I never let people say, you have cancer. I didn't want him to be labeled. So it was just, you don't feel well, son, and we're going to do everything we can to make you feel better. That's the way I coached Tyler. So when Robert started really physically seeing symptoms of sickness, and he was eventually on a feeding tube, all the things that Tyler could physically see, I let Tyler ask me questions. Is Dad going to be okay? And I said, we're doing everything we can, but sometimes when you get older, son, your body starts shutting down, and there's things that Dad is dealing with that, are harder for him to battle as an older person. Because I tried very much to think about Tyler as a child not being scared, going in and out of the same institutions that Robert's going on. It's hard for him to wrap his head around the fact that he has cancer, and what does that actually mean? So that was the way that we managed it as a family. If questions were asked, we tried to answer honestly, but try not to put a seed of fear.
And at that stage, Tyler's still 4 years old, or is he a little older now?
Tyler is, he's about 5.5, closer to 6. Yeah.
Okay. When
Robert's diagnosis. So Robert was in the fight with us for, years before his diagnosis happened. And, selfishly, I remember when Robert got his diagnosis, I remember us sitting down saying, maybe Robert saying, maybe I'm going so Tyler can stay. It's hard to wrap your head around a family that had, both of these things happening. And so there was peace in that, I don't know, for him to know that he was struggling and going through, but maybe it was in an effort to for Tyler to stay. And that's just not how it works. We both know that.
Maybe I'll have you continue to share the story about Tyler, and then maybe the way you dealt with it at the time, the way you've dealt with it over time.
Yeah. So before it was cool, Tyler used to always say, "This is the best day ever." And like after Tyler passed away, there like people were doing that for weddings. It would be the logo, like, "Come to our best day ever." Well, that was before that even existed. Tyler used to say it was the best day ever. So his mindset was always, can you believe it? Like, we're alive today. We're together. This is awesome.
He would have that attitude even as a sick child.
In
this
the
is
hospital.
The best day ever.
In the hospital. I'll give you one example. There was this day we had a mural on the wall. So in the hospital, he loved to do arts and crafts. So I would call the child life people and say, "Bring us up markers and paper, and we're going to do some art projects." And so this one day we put a huge mural on the wall, and we're drawing all these different critters. I have it hanging in my house now. And Tyler looks at me and he goes, "Mom, this is the best rainforest ever." I mean, we didn't even have rainforest animals in it. And I'm like, "It really is, Tyler." And he's like, "I just love doing this." This was right after a chemotherapy appointment.
Oh my God.
Sammy's sitting at the end of the bed. She's laughing. I mean, so basically that's, as a life lesson, what Tyler taught me is no matter what the circumstances are, it's kind of your attitude.
Live today and make it the best day ever.
Yeah.
That's I need to learn from that.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we all do.
We all do, yeah.
So Tyler continued to progress downwardly at some point after a few surgeries, the chemo, the radiation. Was there sort of a discovery that he's not going to be cured?
Yeah, I think in pediatrics, in cancer, you're always given a lot of hope with reality, and you choose to listen to the hope side. So at one stage, when Tyler really took the sharpest turn, it had progressed into his spine. So then we discovered tumors in his spine, and what happened was it made it really difficult for him to walk. So we got to a stage where now it was just trying to manage pain. Anyone you know with spinal injuries or impact, it's always really tough. And I remember being at the doctor's and our doctor, Trish, saying, we just want to make sure that he's comfortable. We're going to continue to treat him, Catrina, but let's just make sure that he's comfortable and he can still live his best days ever. And that session in particular, when we were discharged, I was told, know that he probably won't walk because it's going to be very uncomfortable kind of from here on out. And this is the craziness, is that we got home and I sat him on his bed. He had all his little Thomas tank engines there. And I said, "Do you want me to build you a track? And where do you want, Mr. Thomas to go?" And we're playing. And the next thing you know, Tyler sits at the end of his bed and he gets off and walks across his room and grabs a book that he wanted me to read and goes back to his bed and said, "Can you put me back on the bed, Mom?"
Just with pain?
With pain. I guess as adults, we get in our head and say, like, "Yeah, it hurts so bad, I'm not going to walk." And he just was like, "I want that book, so I'm going to figure out a way to get across the room." So it's just an example of the resilience and the spirit of Tyler. And then to answer your question, that was probably the last progression that was the most challenging, was when it moved into his spine. We did some treatment, some new innovative treatment, and unfortunately we couldn't mitigate the spinal issues. So that was the point where I sat down with both the medical teams, and they made a special meeting for me where the Stanford doctors came to the Children's Hospital and the Children's Hospital doctors, and we came into a room together so that we could talk about discharging both of them. It's still the toughest day of my life. So in that, it's worth mentioning little special angels that were there, doctors giving me their passes so that I could go in the secret tunnel under the facilities to make it to Robert, so I could give him a hug before Tyler realized I wasn't really using the bathroom, because the only time he'd let me out of the room is if I had to use the bathroom. So I would sprint to Stanford, go see Robert, sprint back. People really moved mountains for our family. They also made an adjoining room in the Children's Hospital and allowed Tyler's dad, Robert, to be the only and first and I don't know since then if they've had one adult patient to be at the Children's Hospital. We had an adjoining room, and then I was able to just walk back and forth.
Visit both of your patients, both of your family members.
Mm-hmm.
And then did they come out of the hospital after that?
That was the meeting where they were discharged, and they were told, we're moving you to hospice care, palliative care. The main difference being palliative care is we're just trying to make you comfortable, because we know that it's imminent. You'll be passing. And that's where the concept of our foundation was born, because Robert immediately said, if we're being discharged, I want to go to the ocean. And my little crew of angels, all my best friends, Stacy, Camellia, Christy, all these people that have loved on us and supported our family, said, let's make it happen. So they started researching houses on the ocean, and they found a beautiful place with an ocean view, and they moved all of our stuff in from our home, all the things like Tyler's trains and Robert's favorite things, and made it feel like our home on the beach.
Oh, my goodness.
And that's where we lived.
That's where you lived for the rest of Robert's life.
Mm-hmm. And Tyler's too.
And Tyler's too. And how long did you live there for? How long did Robert live? And then how long did Tyler live?
Yeah, we lived there for just under 3 months after we exited the hospital.
They both died in very close proximity to each other time-wise.
45 days.
Oh, my gosh. Robert died first, and obviously devastating. And then Tyler's 45 days later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Both there, and both with me. My mom, my sister, Sammy. She wasn't obviously bedside, but yeah, we were there with them.
And Sammy at that age would have been about 3 or 4?
Just about 3, yeah.
So, the only thing I can think of is the feeling that I might have. It doesn't seem fair.
Yeah. Yeah. What kind of...
Tell me about that process of just dealing with, obviously it's over. The battle is over at some level. What kind of like different feelings? Is it the stages of grief that we all hear about? Is like, what happened?
I think I still go through those stages of grief even 13 years later. So grief never really leaves you. It unpacks itself in different ways. And when you've had compound tragedy, think about people who've had multiple loss, like in a hurricane and a family's lost, or a car accident. This was a compound tragedy. So how I dealt with it was I had to process them independent of one another. To try to think about losing them both was just pretty debilitating for me. So I chose to focus on Tyler first. And processing Tyler. What does that feel like? Just listening to all his favorite music, eating his favorite foods, just keeping him alive with me. Everything I could do to be a tribute to him on a daily basis is what I did. And it's not that I didn't miss Robert. It's just I couldn't manage through it. When Robert passed away, the whole community came, and it was this amazing, beautiful tribute to him. There was probably 400 people. We had people outside of the church, and these were all just extensions of our family and friends. Robert, Sammy and I walked with Tyler behind their father, Robert, and there was so much love there. I mean, I remember hearing like friends of mine singing Amazing Grace, and just people just pouring their hearts out. When Tyler passed away, I just didn't have the capacity to do that again. So it was a very small, intimate celebration of life. We had family friends who were Hawaiian singers, which was a family place we loved. We always went to Hawaii together. So we had, Somewhere Over the Rainbow being sung, and we had everyone do sing-along Mary Poppins because that was Tyler's favorite movie. And so the way that we approached both of the losses was a little differently based off of what we could handle as a family, I feel. And looking back, it's, I'm not going to have any regrets. Even if I didn't do everything exactly right, I just feel like you can't do that to yourself. Life's a journey. And the other thing is it really tested my faith. Robert grew up Catholic, so the kids were baptized Catholic, and I'm Christian. But I remember looking at our priest and looking also at our pastor, both Christian and Catholic, and saying, what kind of a God does this? And at that time, it just felt like that, this loss was, how could he let that happen? I realize now we're in a very broken world, and he never left my side. But for a long time, I pretty much yelled at him every day. Like, I don't want to talk to you. I don't even know who you are. And that, keeping that door open with communication with my faith led me to be able to open the door again, which is where I am today.
Even though you're yelling at him, it's part of the relationship.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like a couple, right? When things are broken, if you don't talk about it and get it out, then it just, you break down.
And I have to imagine our audience. I know I'm thinking, what about Sam? How is she through this with you being, obviously she's devastated too, because she's old enough to have some understanding of what's going on. But then seeing mom so hurt.
Mm-hmm. She's amazing. Fast forward to today. She's 16 going on 17, which I have to say because Sound of Music is also another. So I've been singing it to her. You're 16. Go. And she's like, Mom, I want to be 17. So you're not. She initially was a very shy, reserved, scared child after everything happened. When I was hosting my foundation events, that year afterwards, she would always be on my hip. She would always either be putting her head down or not giving eye contact. We didn't think that she was ever going to be like socially comfortable just based off of all the tragedy she had been through at such a young age. Fast forward to today, she's an honor student at Del Oro. She just made junior princess court, and she was on the back of a car waving, with her person. And if you saw her today, and when you see her today, people who know her say, we just never imagined that Sammy would just develop into this amazing, confident young woman.
That's really good to hear. And she was in sports too, if I'm not mistaken. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I wish there was like an audience to ask questions here, but I want to hear about the organization, right? So part of dealing with it was, let me do something to help others. Is that where tell us about that.
What I wanted to do was not just help others, it was to give them protected time to kind of almost forget about their circumstances and just create memories together. Because the best part of going to the beach house with the boys, even though we knew this was the tail end of their diagnosis, we made every day count. So it was,
everything was supposed to be the best day ever.
Everything was the best day ever.
Even though it was 45 days or so, or a very short amount of time. It was like every day.
We made it count. I mean, actually, I'll never forget that year was the Super Bowl.
Oh, Harbaugh?
And we had everyone over to watch that. It's very memorable to me. Okay. That was that Super Bowl year. We would cook. We would have parties like as if it was just a regular Super Bowl. We would have every day, Tyler would say, you know what? I think today's going to be just because I love you today. And I said, I like that day. And then we would spend hours cutting out hearts and putting them on the banister and invite everyone over and say, this is just because I love you. Do you want to come hang out with us? So it was just like making the most of every day. And
you're living by the ocean.
Yes.
Would that be near San Francisco or Southern California? Where
it was in Aptos.
Aptos. Okay, so you're going to have kind of colder by the ocean, I suppose, especially that time of year. But people, did they move down there with you? I mean,
they just drove.
People coming over?
Everyone just drove on a regular basis.
Okay, so they just made the commute.
Yes.
Your friends came from wherever and
Yes.
visited. Okay.
Yes. And we'd have people couch surfing with us, the ones that would come from far distances. We'd have people on floors. I mean, we just made it work. Like, if you're going to come visit, we would love for you to be here, and we'll find a way to make it work. And Robert's family is a very big Filipino family, and they love to cook. And so it was constantly like the love language of cooking, right? So every day if you walked into our house, you would have international flair, and you would be hosted and greeted as though we were hosting you, even though you were there to visit the boys. And that's the way the boys wanted it. They wanted everyone to feel really special. So that's what we did.
So you started an organization that does what? Tell me about what you do, and maybe like to hear some stories about like how do you create the best day ever for people?
I love that. Well, I personally onboard the families. So I usually get the referrals through social workers, folks that are working on the cases with the families. Most of our recipients have been children because I'm deeply connected to the children's hospitals, but we also honor adults
Is
as
it
well.
people that are diagnosed as terminal? Is that where
Yes.
they're at? Okay.
Thanks, Mark. It's so different than Make-A-Wish and other organizations that once you get a diagnosis, you may actually survive. They still host you with gifts. We only host families that are in the terminal stage, and we're trying to really create this mental like photograph and memories book with them by setting up special experiences. So what we do is once I onboard your family, I learn everything about the recipient, but I also learn everything about the siblings, grandma, anyone who's going to be at the house. I want to know everything because I want them to walk in and feel like they thought of me for this, not just the
So
recipient.
it's the best day ever, and typically it's at their house.
No, we actually do a week-long trip.
Okay.
And because we did the ocean, we typically try to do the ocean. But so for the first, 11 years we've been in operation, we've either done Lake Tahoe and a beautiful lakeside retreat, because that was another one of our favorites, or we do Aptos.
Okay.
So the good news is, this is great news. It's been my mission since then to be able to have a house that we could actually be our primary house that we can give to as many families as we want. And we just closed escrow on that house.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Right around Tyler's birthday.
Is it the one in Tahoe or Aptos?
We bought in Lake Almanor.
Lake Almanor. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that's not as far either.
Yeah.
Right? It's a little closer.
Yeah, so we're going to be channeling Reno and Sacramento children and families there, and we're never going to say no because we don't have to. It's just a matter of timing. And so now really the funds we used to raise primarily went to the cost of rentals. As you know, we wanted fancy. So we wanted these families to like be in a house they've never experienced before. Maybe they've never had a vacation like this. So they could just be in awe with that, right? They could be in awe with the water. And then they could just focus on just being happy inside.
And so when you figure out who the family members are, and then what other data do you gather to create the experience?
What are your favorite foods? What's your favorite music? What are some things that you would love to experience with your family while you're there? Some of the more interesting things we've done, Mireya was a girl who was diagnosed, and her family her mother and father never got married, but they lived together, and it was her and siblings, and she had wanted to be a flower girl for them. So
she's a child. How old is she at that
she
time?
was 6.
So a little kid. Okay.
Yeah. And so she said, we got a place right on the water, and we got some local support with flowers and food and dresses. We even had like some local beauticians who did their makeup and their hair. And then the pastor from our church came down and married them.
Oh my God.
That's a unique one. But
Yeah.
when I
She got to be the flower girl?
Yes.
In her mom and dad's wedding? Or
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. In that wedding. Yeah.
Oh my God.
So that was a unique one. But, there's other experiences like someone who can't travel, and she really loves Hawaii. So we've had like the musicians come in and play ukulele with them, and we would send flowers and leis and matching outfits. And we always have a photographer. So every single moment gets caught on film, and then we gift that to the families so that they can always remember.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have the house in Lake Almanor now.
Yes.
So no more, I guess, the plan is to not do the Aptos and Tahoe ones anymore.
Yes.
Tell me about the house on Lake Almanor. I've always thought that was a cool area.
It's a cool area, yeah. And there's Lake Tahoe is beautiful, but it's got such a buzz to it now, and has been growing so much over the years. And what I love about Lake Almanor is it's peaceful. It's very quiet, small town, beautiful lake, lots of hikes, lots of outdoor activities. Any boating is allowed on the water. You can do whatever you'd like, right? So those were all attractive to us. The house was out of our price range initially. Obviously, it's a nonprofit. We're trying to look for, and also my husband and I, we purchased this home not through proceeds of the foundation, but to gift it to the foundation. So we had some boundaries that we wanted to, set for ourselves. And when we first saw this house, we walked in and said, this is the place. But the owner wasn't ready to, part ways at the price point that was comfortable for us. And that was fine. We understood. And we kept looking. And then we came back to it about 3 months later, and we saw it was still on the market. And so sat down at the table and found a way to make it happen. And we actually moved in on Thanksgiving week to get situated for the families. And that was Tyler's birthday.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, he would have been 19. So.
Oh, my gosh. And so tell me about why was it, why did you know that was, perfect?
Your viewers are going to think this is silly. I'm just going to say it was the feeling I got. It was, I can tell you that the house is great for someone who has mobility issues. It's ready for wheelchairs, all those things. So that piece is like a no-brainer. It was more just the feeling I got when I walked in. I kind of looked around and I could see a big, great room with the view of trees and a big fireplace. And I thought I could see people sitting here. And even if they didn't go to any other room in the house, they could be present here. I could feel laughter there. There was a big gourmet kitchen, which I know that most of our families, part of what they love to do is just make food and be together and just do all the things. So those were the two things that really stood out. And then the generosity of the owner. He said, knowing what you're doing, you can keep all the furniture. And so we had this great place to start for the families. And now we just need to fill it with food and do activities that are custom to the families, and we can do anything we want.
That is so cool. So on the organization, is there a website, or is there if somebody wanted to do you accept donations from people and that kind of thing? Okay.
Yes, we are totally out of funds. Okay. So every time we get a family, it's like I go to my husband, I'm like, we can't say no, right? And he's like, seriously, are we going to do a fundraiser again? So we kind of didn't do any fundraisers after COVID. We did 8 years running. We had amazing success. We've hosted hundreds of families. But then once COVID hit, I haven't done an annual fundraiser again. So the way they can support is every dollar is going to go towards the families. So basically on the website, it's tylersgracefoundation.org. You can see that there's various things that if you donate $100, it could go to all the gift baskets that the families receive when they arrive. If you donate $500, you could do food for the entire week. You could do gas cards. So you'll see where your generosity goes in terms of support. The good news is you don't see those dollars going to the house anymore, because now it's just basically housekeeping costs that we will be able to charge and move on for the next family.
Wow. And one thing that I had he's my best friend, died a couple years ago, and it's interesting to think about, like, what do you do when you know that somebody, he had cancer, he had pancreatic cancer, and so he died after within a 7-month time frame. He got diagnosed, and then he made it 7 months. And we shared a loft at Golden One Arena and Golden One Center. And so we'd go to concerts and Kings games and stuff together a lot. And I guess where I'm circling back around to thank the Sacramento Kings. So you get one of these lofts, and you normally go up, you get a VIP treatment and stuff like that to go and get into one of those lofts, which is really nice. But he was in a wheelchair, and he didn't want to go through with everybody else in a wheelchair. He had lost weight. It was just a tough thing. And so the president of the Kings, John Reinhardt, set it up so that our families, him and my wife and him and his wife, and there might have been a couple other people, we got to go in a back way where nobody would see you and all that kind of thing. And then you get into the loft. So you're not out having to be exposed to the rest of the crowd as much in terms of like not wanting to draw attention to yourself and stuff. And so it's like things like that it's interesting when you're going through, like, I'll never forget that type thing. So it makes me think for myself, that was for my friend. And then when you see somebody do something kind for somebody that you care about, there's a level of appreciation that's like super strong. You must see that, you must feel that with certain people. I don't know if you wouldn't mind telling me like things that people, you shared some of that, but is there anything that like surprised you, like this person came out of the woodwork, or this company for either you or one of the people that have gone through your program?
I think, negative news is, I'm sorry to hear about your best friend too, by the way. I think negative news is all we hear about these days. And so generosity exists in this world. And these hearts of service, like you described with John, I think there's so many more than we give people credit for. And it's almost just like looking at someone and really seeing them, right?
And it's interesting because I don't think I've really ever said thanks to the guy. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, well, I don't know. What am I going to say? Yeah. I mean, I've talked to him a couple times, but maybe I said thanks. But like, what do you say? How do you?
Thanks was the event. That's all he needed to know, was that was taking place. That's what he did it for, was to know that he could open that door for that event to take place in that way. He didn't do it because he wanted you to say thanks or to even ever mention it again, right?
The one thing they did too is they did because he's a loyal Kings fan, they did a Kings jersey with his basketball. With his name on the back. And, but we put it up in our loft. And now it's in his wife's house. So,
I think one thing I would say to the viewers is don't be afraid of asking, because you'd be surprised if there's someone in need in your life and you don't have the means to support. Don't be afraid of asking for things, because people have generous hearts, and a lot of folks are very servant leaders. And so it's a matter of thinking, what would be impossible? I don't know if it's impossible because I haven't asked.
Yeah.
So
and it's interesting to think like money is one ask, but if you have a connection with somebody, I mean, that didn't cost the Kings anything. It maybe cost something for the framed jersey, but it's like, it's not a major expense for the Sacramento Kings to get us up the back elevators and all that. Like, those are the kind of, I guess, relationships. If you have that kind of influence or those kind of relationships, those kind of connections, those are like super valuable.
Oh, they are.
And people want to do that for other people.
Yeah, there's actually a recipient, her name is Lily, that she was turning 18, and we hosted her in Tahoe. And her friends came up and they did her birthday celebration up there. Well, since she passed, her mom, Moon, has built a house in her honor, calling it Lily's House in Tahoe. And she's recently started gifting that to Tyler's Grace recipients. See, those are the types of things like from the heart. She doesn't have to open up her home. There's legality issues and all kinds of things hosting families that are, terminal. But, she's doing those things to make that happen in honor of her daughter. And I also feel like people do things sometimes, even though they were supporting your best friend, sometimes there's something that's happened to them that gift feeds their soul for something that's happened to them or personally impacted them. They're able to kind of pay it forward. So don't be afraid to ask. The connections are very important. I think the other thing is just seeing people, showing up and seeing them for where they are. I mean, the other day I was this is going to sound so crazy, and this will probably get edited out of the whole show, but to be honest, like, it was a meaningful moment. There was a woman sitting at the bus stop, and she was clearly homeless, and she had a bunch of bags around her, and she just had her head hanging. And she, I just was looking at her, and she just looked up at me, and we locked eyes. And I smiled at her, and I gave her a little wave, and she just felt like she had been seen. I could see it in her eyes for the first time in forever. And she waved back. I didn't run over there with dollars or a bag full of food. I just saw her. And so I think that when you have someone in your life that's been diagnosed with something, a lot of people will say, like, what can I do? And they constantly say, what can I do? Can I help? Can I do this?
Right. You want to do something, but you don't know what to do.
Right. And I would say that my biggest recommendation for anyone is don't ask, just do. And typically your heart will tell you what that is. It could just be, I had a friend who used to show up at the hospital with fresh magazines for me every week, because she knew that I was living at the hospital, and she would just leave them. Sometimes I would see her and sometimes I wouldn't. Just magazines. Do you know how much that stands out in my mind as a memory? Trail mix, because she knew that I'd be there. Trail mix and magazines. So it's just like she just did. She never said, what do you need?
Yeah, that's interesting. my son was shot in Afghanistan, and I don't compare that at all to what somebody who's dying is going through at all, zero. So don't think of that as comparison, but more of the things that we saw people do for the wounded warriors.
Yes.
And one lady stood out to me. She was a dog walker. So he's in the hospital in San Diego, going through surgeries and whatnot. And some lady is she's a dog walker. So maybe she gets paid $100 a day. I don't know. She doesn't have a lot of money, I'm sure, in terms of the occupation. But she came in and donated her dog walking money to my son. It's like, are you, not to my son, but to the Wounded Warrior group that was in his, his part of the hospital. And I was like, wow, there's people that, even though I think it was like $100 or something, there's like little things, but there's all kinds of things. That was a small thing, maybe big for that person, but there are all kinds of things that, he got all kinds of experiences that people donated because he had been shot. So there's a lot of good hearts that know how to rally around that kind of thing. But I think sometimes when he was in a spot where that group of people, because they're veterans, they're getting like attention. I think there's a lot of people that go through difficult times and nobody really knows about them. It's like my buddy didn't really want it. He didn't want anybody to even know he had cancer.
Yes.
He didn't even tell anybody except like a month or two before he died. He called like, we had like 10, 15, 20 buddies over that are all entrepreneurs, and he got to share the story, the experience of like what it was like going as a I think at the time he was 64, like what it was like to die, and while he was still alive, as a super powerful entrepreneurial guy talking to other people of influence, here's what it feels like, and he got to share that. What a gift that he gave. It sounds like Tyler, he gave a lot of gifts back too. It's helping people feel like it's making the best day ever. But it is kind of an interesting question, because I think for a lot of us, I think it's probably shyness or maybe not knowing what to do. You want to I want to do the right thing, but you don't want to be that person that goes we all know people that maybe just follow the problems and try to be involved whenever somebody else has a problem. You don't want to be that person. Like, what's this guy doing around here? Right. I don't want to be perceived. I just want to be helpful.
Yeah. A lot of things can be, and were done for me anonymously. So it's interesting to note that a lot of folks did things without even wanting any to be noticed for it. So I'll give you a couple examples. I found out later who it was, but there would be like bone broth soups left on our porch. And Tracy, the wife of a friend of mine, Brandon, did all this research to find out that bone broth was one of the best healing things you could possibly do. So she would just make mason jars of bone and leave it on my porch. Later is when we found out. It wasn't because she was looking for anyone to say anything about it. She was just trying to do what she could do to support a really sad situation. Our first event, I was gifted the opportunity through another foundation head, Aubrey Brown, whose daughter passed away from SIDS, and her husband's a Sharks player. And they started this really meaningful foundation for children who passed. So she invited me to her event, and they hosted it at the Ritz-Carlton in Half Moon Bay. Well, through that event, the general manager came and shook my hand and say, I hear you have a story you want to tell. Can we host you here? They did not take any credit for the fact that our first event was hosted there, and all I paid for was the food to get people to come in. And that same night, we had a person walking her dog, listening to my speech. She walked into the bar and said, I don't want this woman to know who I am, but this check should go to her foundation. She wrote it to the Ritz. Oh my gosh. And the general manager ended up paying it through me for the foundation. I don't even know who that person is. Oh, that's what I mean. Not everyone's looking for to be noticed, but they just want a gift from their heart.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe just a couple more questions. In terms of like helping you and your foundation, they can go to your website, but they can donate money, but do you have events? Do you have other ways to get involved?
Yeah.
Like how do you get those people to help you?
Totally. This will be our first event from COVID. So we did 7 events leading up to COVID. Then we haven't hosted an event since then. We lived in the Bay Area during the time of our events, so we did all of our events up there. This will be our first event locally. I mean, we might even do like the Blue Goose. I'm not sure. It'll be just a grassroots little effort to get this community up to speed with what it is that we do here. So stay tuned. Like, I hope that they follow us, because that's going to be coming out for later this year.
So there's no date on the calendar?
Not yet, but we're working on that.
An event.
We're touring facilities. We're talking with people.
Yeah.
Actually, your events host who helps you with a lot of things, Ashley introduced me to.
Yeah.
Danielle. So I've talked to Danielle. She hosted me for coffee. So
Danielle Rowe, she is awesome.
Yeah. Yes. But she's also very booked. So don't say that.
Yeah, she doesn't need more customers though.
Forget it. So we're just doing all of those foundational things. So they can also, let's just say they want to host a basket for a family. Sometimes people just want to build a basket with all kinds of love and care and then gift that, and we just put their name on it. This person gifted this basket, and sometimes we don't. So we'll definitely need help for the event, to answer your question on how they can support getting it out there. Yeah. I feel like it was very well known, and I was very well connected in my community in the Bay. And so here it's just been grassroots, meeting with folks and saying, I'd like to share my story.
And do you... you said, I think at the beginning you said something like, we don't say no to people. I mean,
we've never said no.
You've never said no yet, but like, is there like the perfect candidate? Because it sounds like the one that you described was a child, but what if it is an adult?
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah. We've done more children, but we've done a lot of adults too. Okay. So think about someone who is, it's a terminal diagnosis, and they're probably on the end of their chapter here, and they still have enough energy to be able to spend time with family and make some memories. They can get to Lake Almanor or Tahoe.
You just bought the house in Lake Almanor. Is it already functioning?
It's ready.
It's rolling. Okay, got it. Okay.
If we got a call tomorrow, we'd be sending them up there.
Got it.
It's just a matter of stocking it up with whatever their custom experience looks like. And that's where those dollars will go as well.
Wow. Okay, so what did I not ask you? That's my last question. What did I not ask you that we might want the audience to know, learn?
Learn. Well, first I would say that I would want the audience to know that whether or not someone is asking for help, that to look for opportunities to help. I think the point you made was really valid. Your best friend didn't say he wanted help. He didn't even want anyone to notice. But 9 times out of 10, someone who's struggling with that type of diagnosis, whether they say no, they want help. So there are always ways to look for supporting someone. It doesn't have to be financially. It doesn't have to be through gifts. Maybe it's just through sending them a scripture or a little note every day. I thought of you this morning. Take a look at the sunrise. I mean, there's simple things you can do for people that are in need. So that's maybe number one. The second is that I know I said, but I want to reiterate that there's so much compassion in the world, and particularly with the entrepreneur community that I have been able to kind of connect with here. Margot, I think you had on the show.
Margot Folks.
Margot was kind of a really great baseline for me to be able to say, these are the people you should talk to. This is how you should stay connected. So people are willing to give their expertise and their time if they believe in something. So the other thing is, it's one thing to be passionate about something, but you've got to have like the blueprint for how you're going to do things, right? So I think, why is Tyler's Grace so important to me? Not just because of the work, because I am so passionately connected to the families. And so even I think that bodes well for any entrepreneur. Like, you can have a great idea, but you've actually got to be able to dial it down to what is the plan and what is the impact. And so it's not just the great idea, it's the execution piece too, right? So gosh, we had no business starting a nonprofit. My board, none of us had ever been on a nonprofit, but we educated ourselves and we said, what do we need to know to be successful? And we were, and we have been. So,
well, congratulations.
Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And thank you for joining me and being vulnerable about telling your story and sharing it with me and our audience. And I know that it resonated with me for sure and other people. So really, I just thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for what you do.
Absolutely.
Thanks for watching today's show. My goal for every episode is that you find a takeaway, something tangible you can use in your business today. And if you have a comment about a favorite takeaway, feel free to put it in the box below. And if you have a topic that you'd like me to bring up on the show, don't forget to let me know. And also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want to learn more about entrepreneurship. Because at Haney Biz, we are always by your side.